There are 5 things I absolutely hate about this bike, the Yamaha Tenere 700. Hey, how's it going? Welcome to my channel. As I mentioned in the intro, there are 5 things I absolutely hate about this bike. And I wanted to see if your experience, for those of you that own this bike, has been similar to mine. And if you own this bike and your experience has not been similar, I want to hear about that too. So the first thing that I really hate about this bike is any bike that is classified an adventure bike, in my opinion, needs to be good at doing long distance travel. This bike, in my experience, is awful at long distance travel. The wind protection is really low. The weather protection's not great. The fuel range is an issue in order to run those long distances. It's just not comfortable as an adventure long distance touring bike, and I absolutely hate that part of it. It is also quite uncomfortable to sit on for hours on end. I know the seats can be replaced and you can improve that, but it's really the ergonomics of the bike and the way that it fits me. I really don't like riding this bike hours on end like a bunch of other bikes that I have ridden. This is one of the most uncomfortable bikes that I have ridden. And I've done a few things to try to improve it, but it didn't inspire me the way that I had hoped in doing long distance adventure motorcycle, hitting the off-road type travel. The number 2 thing I really hate about this bike, and I mentioned it briefly in number 1, and that is the fuel range is pretty small compared to other bikes. I think it's like 4.2 gallons, and I'm only able to get, before I go on to reserve, about 120, 130 miles. So when I take this on any long distance travel, I have to carry extra fuel because I just don't trust how far I'm gonna get on this fuel tank. The other thing about this fuel tank I just don't understand is, in this modern era, why is it a metal fuel tank? All the other bikes I've been riding have had plastic fuel tanks. If you drop this bike at a really awkward angle and land on a stump or a tree or rocks, you're gonna dent this tank up and it's gonna get really scratched up. And then you're gonna be looking at trying to replace a really expensive tank, trying to get this fixed, or going the Turbis route with the expanded tank to get that extra range. I had considered doing that on this bike, going with the plastic tank, but my bike's blue and they either have black or white, and it just doesn't look good. And I didn't want to try to change the whole color of this bike. So the fuel tank capacity and being a metal tank, man, it really irritates me. The number 3 thing that I really hated about this bike is I knew when I bought it that the suspension was gonna be soggy, but I didn't realize how bad it was gonna be. Just even putting a minimal amount of weight, cranking the preload all the way up on the rear, and going out riding, I had to ride extremely slow in order not to bottom the entire suspension out. Now, I ended up spending about $350 to put a new Rally Raid spring on the rear shock, and I believe the Yakugar springs in the front. So not the super stiff, it's like a middle level. It's still kind of soft. I think it sits better. The sag in the rear shock and in the forks is in a much better position, but it's just really irritating. I know every single bike that rolls off the showroom floor needs some sort of adjustment, some new springs, because those of us in North America, we're heavy, big people, and stock suspensions just don't work. I really don't understand why bike manufacturers, when they send bikes to North America, they just don't put better springs in. It just is such an irritation that every single bike, including this one, and especially this one, needed a suspension upgrade. And for this, I had to do it pretty quickly after getting the bike. All right, the number 4 thing I really hate about this bike is it has tubed wheels and tires. I don't understand why modern motorcycles aren't tubeless. It seems like all of the bikes coming out of Europe, they're all tubeless, but out of Japan, they're all tubed. I don't get it. In order to upgrade this to a tubeless set of wheels, there are aftermarket upgrades, but it's $3 grand for that upgrade. And I think bikes like this would be much more popular with something so simple as tubeless wheel setups. There's plenty of options out there. So to go with tubed, I knew that's what I was getting into, but after having to change the tubes a handful of times due to punctures and changing tires, I hit my threshold. I don't want to do it anymore. I really, really hate that this is not tubeless, and the cost to go tubeless is cost prohibitive for me. The number 5 thing that I really, really hate about this bike, and I thought I could overcome it and it wouldn't be a big deal for me, and because I don't do aggressive off-road riding, it wouldn't be a big issue, but I've just found it to be very problematic, and that is the way this carries its weight. Metal fuel tank, the fuel itself is up high, so if your fuel tank is very full, there's a lot of weight up there. And then the way the engine sits in the frame, the engine itself sits quite high in the frame, bringing all of that weight up quite a bit, so that this bike, the tipping point of the point of no return, is that angle is very, very small. It doesn't take much off of center holding the bike, whether riding or not, for that thing. It just falls over. And I have dropped this bike a number of times in places that I was like, how did this thing just fall out from underneath me? I've never had any other bikes do that. So yeah, the balance point of this bike and the way it carries its weight, I really didn't think that was gonna be a problem for me, but it is. I am not a highly skilled rider, and because of that, it has caused that weight, that balance, that tipping point. Because of that on this bike, I've dropped this more than any other bike I've ridden in the last decade. All right, I have a bonus thing that I really hate about this bike, and I have talked about it in the spring after coming back on a couple of long distance trips. I did a couple of close to 2,000 mile trips on this bike. And when I got back from those trips after riding this bike, I started thinking that maybe I really don't like riding like I thought I did, because doing the long distance travel to go ride off-road, whether it be in southern New Mexico or Big Bend National Park, it's a lot of miles. It's a lot of days of just sitting in the saddle. And I had done a lot of that previously on other bikes, and it was fine. I mean, part of those long distance days, it can be a bit of a slog, but if you're comfortable and you can get down those roads and cover that kind of mileage and time, then it's not bad, because then you can appreciate what you're doing when you get there. With this bike, I hated it. I absolutely hated the long distance rides. And then I would get somewhere to ride around, and then would have some of the other issues that I've described in the other reasons why I hate this bike. So that really came down, the bottom line with this bike and why I will be selling it in the next few months is that it does not inspire me to ride. Seeing this sitting in the garage, I don't feel obligated to get out and take it out and ride. I've got 5,000 miles on it, and I seriously doubt I'll even put another 500 on it before I sell it, because it just has not done it for me. Now, I know there's plenty of people that put tens of thousands of miles on this bike, and good for you, but for me, it hasn't done it. It's uncomfortable. There's not a lot of wind protection. The balance of the bike is really high, and in order to get it to be the bike that I want it to be, or to get it to the point where it's similar to other bikes, it's gonna cost thousands of dollars, and I just don't see the value in doing that to this bike. It kind of reminds me, and I've said this before, I had a KLR 650, a 98 KLR 650, and I rode that bike for about 9 months, and I hated it so much. And my idea of at the time of having is like, if all riding is like this, I don't want to do it. So I quit for quite a few years, and that's what this bike reminds me of, is that 98 KLR 650. Because of that, and all of the things I hate, I will be getting rid of this bike. So anyway, Let me know what your experience has been on this bike. Do you relate to any of the issues that I have had with this? Have you had one and got rid of it because it just wasn't doing it for you? Or have you had this bike and have just absolutely loved it and put tens of thousands of miles on it and can't imagine riding any other bike? Let me know what your experience has been in the comments below. I know my experience and the style of riding that I do is not the same as all of you out there. I do a lot of long distance travel to do that off-road riding. And I know that that is not typical from what I see. I know some of you are just, trucking or trailering your bike to go ride a BDR on something like this, and I'm sure that works perfectly fine. I like to ride everywhere in order to do the more fun stuff, just the way I like to do things. So anyway, let me know what your experience is down in the comments below, good or bad. If you have your own top 5 things that you hate about this bike, leave that in the comments below. Now, I will be doing a balanced, the 5 things I do love about this bike. There are things I do love about it. That'll be out a little bit later, but really this has not been the bike for me. So anyway, remember, you can always make more money, but you cannot make more time. Go do that ride you've been thinking about and don't put it off to the future. Thanks for watching. Get out, do some riding, ride safe, and I will see you out there.